You're listening to Tom's Engaging HR podcast, where we're amplifying, humanizing, and engaging leaders who are making work better for employees every day. Thanks for joining us for a fun and engaging conversation. Let's go.
Welcome back to Tom's Engaging HR, lucky number 11 episode. I know a lot of people look at lucky 13. For me, it was always lucky 11. That was one of my numbers back in high school sports. So really special episode for me. What else makes it special? We have two Toms at the microphone today. Always fun. I don't know if you've ever met a Tom, but anytime you're around a one Tom, you almost always find another Tom. We always come in pairs, and the Toms always end up chatting with each other. So we're going to bring that to life. The other piece is I'm a New Yorker, and this other Tom's a New Yorker. So we got all kinds of connectivity here. So I'm going to jump right into it and introduce our guest for today. Tom Schin is the high-energy owner of Build Better Culture. With almost 2 decades of experience in HR, recruiting, and management under his belt, he's the go-to guru for organizations that want to create stellar workplaces. Tom's all about helping companies build an insanely awesome company culture, skyrocket employee engagement, and level up their leadership skills to keep their teams jamming. Whether it's nailing communication skills, embracing accountability, mastering the art of hiring like a boss, or diffusing conflicts, Tom's got your back. Get ready to build a workplace that's kick-ass with Tom Schin in your corner. Tom, great bio, and welcome to Tom's Engaging HR.
Tom, it's an exciting moment for me to be on your show. I appreciate you so much. You know, when you hear about two Toms, the only thing I can think is two Toms walk into a bar. But it's so true. When you run into another Tom, you're like, all right, I already know your name and I'm not going to mess it up. I'm safe.
Yeah, and I see lots of people with different names, so I don't know. Maybe it's just my perspective as a Tom. I feel like Tom's just always, there's like this magnet thing. You don't see two Toms fighting with each other, right?
Not really. And for me, it's a Gemini thing, right? You have kind of the twin sons or whatever you want to call it. It's just they generally just get along. I got another buddy Tom down in Albany, and it's the same kind of thing. When we work together, we just got along,
Yeah,
fits.
I'm a Cancer, and we tend to be kind of mushy and people-y. So this is going to be a good episode. We're talking horoscopes. Awesome. I wasn't on the docket, but here we are. I do want to compliment you. I know I'll have to get a picture of you. You got to send me one. I'm a hat guy. I always have to have a hat when I'm recording. Usually it's a flat brim, but your hat is fantastic. Is it like a Dia de los Muertos kind of hat, or what am I looking at?
Yeah. So my family and I went out to Los Angeles recently, spent some time out there. I'm a huge Dodgers fan, and we went into the Dodgers club, the shop, both at the stadium and in, some of the park areas.
Yeah.
And right, the money just escalates when you're in those settings, like you're trapped. And so I'm like, I decided I'm not going to spend that. And then my birthday rolls around afterwards, and my son, who graduated college, and he's a grown up now, he happened to order the hat for me.
Wow,
I'm like,
good son.
That's awesome. Like,
that is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. And then my other son, he's like, he knows the other side of me. He got me Legos. So
my son's now 9, and he's really starting to understand me, and it's kind of scary and also like super exciting. Where I was like, oh wait, he gets me, which means he gets the parts of me I kind of try to keep off to the side. He just knows who I am, and I would imagine as you grow older, it just only gets deeper, and it's awesome to keep that connection. I gotta imagine.
Yeah, watching them grow and become these fantastic adults, fantastic people. It's exciting. It's you as a parent, you just want the best for your kid. You want them to succeed. You don't want them to feel pain or get hurt by anything, but they need a little of that. That's how you learn and grow and know what it's like. I tell the story. My youngest, he's now 20, but when we were camping when he was a kid, the old Jiffy popcorn things with the metal handle? Yep. Yeah. So that's cooking on the fire, and he grabs onto the handle, and it's scorching hot. Let's go, screams, ah, right? We put some ice on it. He's feeling a little bit better. What happens next? He goes and grabs it again.
Oh, no.
You're supposed to learn from that one. So he ended up sleeping with a beer can in his hand all night, and he's all of 8 years old or whatever it was.
So that makes 2 of you guys? No?
Yeah.
It's my hat, it's my son's club lacrosse team. I just got it yesterday, so I'm proudly rocking it. But we had a 3-day tournament, and it's his first tournament on defense, playing against some tough teams. And we beat the crap out of the teams that were okay, and got smoked by the top teams, which is kind of right where you want your kid, right? Like good learning, get some wins.
Right.
But man, my kid just got absolutely taken out several times. And my initial reaction is like, oh no.
It's one of those, you hope kids see that stuff too, right?
Yep.
I appreciate the fact that, all right, I got laid out, but now I got my opportunity. I know to look out for that.
Yeah, that's it. Like he got laid out a couple times, but different ways, right? It's not, the parent of me just wanted to go out and like rock this other kid that hit my kid. But then, you see him pop up and he's tough and he's strong and you go, yeah. Like it's like this, like, yeah, I'm, from scared to fear to just super prideful. It's wild being a parent.
Yeah. You're throwing me back into probably 10, 15 years ago. A group of my buddies and I, we played our own made league of Monday Night Hoops. We just played pickup basketball, and it was age ranges of 20s to 60. And somehow I was taught how to set a pick, and I got really good at it. And people just wouldn't see it coming. And I was a little heavier, and you'd have folks that are coming around the corner, boom, run into a brick wall, and I'm like, sorry.
Man, a good pick leaves an impression.
Yeah, I thankfully they're my friends and they didn't get too mad about it, but I can't imagine it felt good.
No, not at all. But it's effective, and I think that kind of leads us into our conversation today. I think both parts of it, right? When you're talking culture, when you're talking leadership, how do you care for people as leaders do versus managers? But then also, how do you go through the rough spots? How do you get them to train and learn from lessons? And it's not your kid, it's people that are grown-ups, that are adults in a lot of cases. At the very least, teenagers, right? When you're looking at how do you do all these things? How do you weave all this together? How do you set the tough picks, because it's part of the game, but then also come together at the end? So I think that's a perfect analogy to lead us into today's conversation.
That's a good segue. Well done. Well done. I had one of my old employees who is similar age to my own kids. The young adults kind of finishing college or just finishing college or still in whatnot, but within that kind of 5-year bucket. And she said one day, she's like, how does it feel to have a group of people working for you that are the same age as your kids? And I'm like, well, thanks for telling me how old I am, number one. But two, it's sort of helpful, right? Because they're at the same bracket where, all right, if you were my kid, I'd probably be a little more tough love with you and a little softer on the other side, right? Help you learn and experience some things so that I'm forcing you to think and come up not only with your own answers, but why you're forming those conclusions. And then you start to see, all right, what if this, what if that, kind of door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, what happens before you act? And so you start to go through some of those motions of giving them options and making them think about things. And I always use the story of when the kids were little, they would come back to the table after doing homework of their first attempt of, you had to check their work and check it off and sign it to turn it back in. And you're probably going through this now because you've got younger kids than mine.
Yep.
And inevitably one would come, did a half-assed job, but just call it what it is. Half-assed, didn't care, just needed to fill out the answers. So you first bunch of times you're helping him solve things, and then you realize, oh, he's not even trying. He's just throwing numbers on the page. All right, now you go do this, and when you're done with it, I want you to think, what am I going to ask you? Come up with that answer and put it down, right? Do the fixes that I'm going to ask you about. Did you double check your work, if it was math, or if it was writing? Did you use sentence structure with periods and exclamation points and capitalization and so forth? And so that eventually turned into, okay, now I want you to think about 3 steps. Do it first. What am I going to say? What's the fix on that? Now come back to me with, draft number 3 before you even bring it to me. Like when you get, and they evolved from that. And so I think that was part of that learning, and I can't take all the credit because, there's other influences in their life, teachers and other parents and outside students and so forth. But you start to kind of carve your way into steering them in the right direction. It's almost kind of like you funnel the water down the slide, but you use some guide rails, or maybe the bowling alley is probably the best metaphor. Not metaphor, but analogy. Like you put the bumpers up and kind of gear the ball to go down the lane.
Yep. And the straighter you can get them to go, the less bumpers they're hitting, right? And that's it.
Yeah, but you have to let them fail. You have to let them fail, right? And not that you want to lose a customer or burn something, but even to talk through a strategy and role play some things out. If they're not failing, they're not learning. If they're having success all the time, they're just riding high as a kite. And what happens when they get into something hard and have all this confidence and ego? I mean, I was that 26-year-old who had all confidence and ego, and I didn't fail until I hit 27, 28, and then it hit hard. I'm like, oh dear.
Right.
And I was ill prepared.
And I think we're really getting into that leader-manager kind of conversation already. You know, it's when I talk to my kid with his homework, that space he said that I'm in it. I say one word to him. I say outcomes. That's it. That's why you do the homework. What are the outcomes? Do you want the outcome of me making you do it again, you spending even more time and you don't get to go watch TV? Do you want the outcome of doing this and not being good at something? Do you want to be behind? You know, what are the outcomes you want? Like, you've got your homework, you have to do it. Don't focus on the work. Focus on what outcomes you want from this, whether it's your micro outcomes of me kicking your butt or not, or the macro outcomes of, hey, I learned something and I'm going to be good in this class and it's going to move me to the next level, or I'm going to be able to contribute more than my friends that I'm competitive against. You know, what's your outcome? And that's all I ever say. And I got that from...
I love that. I think that's a great way to put them in the right mindset, and then you can add some extra sprinkle of salt and pepper and sugar or whatever you want to it by, you know, factoring in not necessarily just outcomes, but how long is they're in school 6-8 hours a day, right? And at 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, their brains are fried. Now you throw in the neurodiverse audience.
Right.
Oh, Nelly, right? If you're not trained on it and you haven't studied it and lived through it, that's a whole nother bailiwick. Like, you can empathize with parents of children that have a bit more difficult time struggling through things of that nature, but it's real. And on the outside, you know, I can say, you know, one of our kids struggled on that for a long time. He's come out of it great, and he's in a great situation, has a job and went to college and been successful. And nice kid, nice young man. But it was a struggle for him, and people didn't understand. He acted normal, he talked normal, but like 10 minutes is his bandwidth, and then you had to give him something else to do to not distract the other two from doing their homework. So everybody learned, but I think it gave us all an exercise in patience and how to deal with frustration. Not that we didn't flip our lid from time to time, we both did, but it certainly helps from a leadership standpoint to think about, if this was my kid or my niece or nephew, how would I handle this, right? And not that you have to be kid glove, but you can be a little bit more tough love with a niece or nephew than you would with somebody where you're just trying to not hurt their feelings. And I'm not saying go hurt people's feelings, but you can be a little bit more direct. They want that directness. They're family. You know, to some degree, many managers, and I'm sure they realize this, they spend more time at work than they do at home. This is your work family. We joke about what work wife, work husband. There's some truth to it, not romantically, but from a be around them, well, you can approach things a little differently from a, let's be clear, let's be friendly, let's be courteous and civil, but let's also have that conversation of, this isn't good enough. You can do better. Let me figure out with you how we can make this better, how we can influence you thinking about this a little differently than you are, by understanding your approach, understanding my approach, finding a blend in the middle that both hits the ultimate goal of what we're trying to accomplish. Maybe your way is a little bit different and there's a better path, but it's clearly not meeting metrics or meeting productivity standards, etc. So let's kind of find the alternate route, or the back channel path, or the path through the woods, if you will, to get to the solution. And it doesn't always have to be your way. That's the trouble that managers face today, is they're so used to, all right, this is the way I did it. Yeah. This was successful. You know, this is how my manager taught me. All right, well, today's audience is different. Tomorrow's audience will be even more different.
If there's one thing that's consistent, it's change, it's evolution. Whether you are super progressive or a little more conservative, the fact of the matter is things are changing, and you have to react to it. And your base, you can keep your base there, but it's kind of the way I talk about it is like the angle. You don't have to like completely 180 who you are. Just change your purview, change your approach, change your outcome by 1-2 degrees. That might be all it really needs. You know, a 1 degree change here, you aggregate it down the line, that's a pretty wide gap as you keep going over time and over experience. So, you know, I think that's a huge piece that even, you know, when we're going to get into this more and more, when we're talking about change, it's not throwing the boulder, rolling a boulder. Sometimes it's a little pebble, and a little pebble in a lake can create some really big ripples. And we're going to get into some really wide topics, but also know that these topics can be applied at a micro level, not just at a macro organization.
Yeah. I used to use there's 100 ways to skin a dead cat, and then I run into a bunch of cat fans who get mad at me for saying that, because I'm a dog guy. But I use a road atlas as the example. You're going on, you know, for you youngsters out there, don't know what a road atlas is, but, you know, it's the big giant map you kept in the trunk when you were going, I went to LA. The last time I was in LA. Yeah, back in the 90s I was in LA, and I had a road atlas and map and stuff on the seat next to me, driving down the 105, not knowing where anything was, stuck in traffic, blah, 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 blah. But trying to use that, your route never goes as planned. Now Google Maps tells you, all right, there's traffic ahead. You should take this other route. Well, back then you had to think for yourself, and there's roadblocks, there's construction, there's traffic, there's all sorts of things that you just can't predict. And you know what? You either got to roll with the punches or find another route. And it's not always the same. You could, I can remember when the GPS came out, taking you into the pond or up the hill. Yeah. Great. I have a bunch of stories around that. We'll save that for another day.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing back some really tough memories of me on like the Pennsylvania Turnpike or 287 in New York at 9 o'clock at night at 10 years old, like looking at like the little mirror light, trying to like figure out how many miles to the next exit for my dad who's driving. Great skill, but yeah, it's hard. There's a lot that goes into that. It's got all your answers. It's still a lot of work, right? And that work doesn't give you perfect outcomes either.
Mm-mm. It doesn't. And I think now, like, you get the post-apocalyptic movies where, all the cell towers and satellites are all destroyed, and it's kind of, deserts everywhere. And all these people knew how to use phones. They didn't know how to read a map. And you find the wise old hermit up on the top of the mountain. Oh, look, I got this whole library of maps for all over the world. So someday we're going to run into those situations. I just know it.
I'm having a great time, by the way. And I said most of the podcast, but like this is really good because we're just kind of fun. I don't know if you're listeners out here, you realize we went from family straight into leadership. Boom, like that. Seamless. We're talking about work, life. I'm a big believer. For me personally, everyone's different, that there doesn't need to be this work-life balance. For me, it's just life. It's one thing for me to figure out. I try not to divide it, and for me, that's helpful. Some people are different, but I'm really loving because that's how this conversation feels right now. Everything's like holistic.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Yeah.
But let's zoom out.
I think in terms of identities, right? Everybody has an identity, right? Yeah. It used to be when you went through some specialized training classes, what's your role at home? What's your role at work? What's your role in the community? What's your role with your neighbors? What's your role at church? Blah, 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 right? All these different roles. I'm like, no. I'm Tom, right? I've got this part of my life and this part of my life. This is what's in my wallet. This is my life wallet. You got to like the whole thing, or you don't like it, and you don't have to. Everybody has these things going on, and that's part of this as we get into culture and engagement and leadership. That's the part that leaders, I think, managers, I should say, quote unquote, managers, struggle with the most is separating or allowing people to bring their whole self to work. They say when they bring you in, hey, we encourage family and togetherness and this and that and the other. But when the employee starts talking about family and well-being and this is going on with mom and dad and grandpa and, hey, I've got a counseling appointment, and they start looking at you funny and there's judgment going on. I'm like, you opened the can of worms. And I don't say worms in a bad way, but you opened this can. You said that you were welcome. That's why I came here, because you advertised X and Y and Z, and now you don't mean it. And then the manager's surprised that they start calling out or stop coming to work or quit. Come on.
I mean, it's that mirror, right? Like, you hear bring your full self to work now a lot. But the employees very often, I think that's a huge disconnect in culture, is the employees expect the full self of the organization. And the organization is often only willing to give one piece, which is, what's your productivity? Are you going to be here tomorrow? How can we count on you to get X, Y, and Z done? Which is, of course, work, right? I just defined work. But when you're advertising, we're talking about a family, we're talking about a culture, it's all these things. It's not just that one. And I think I've never thought of it this clearly before, but like that's the disconnect. Like as I sit here talking to you right now, it's organizations saying it and not living it.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that might come from you've got somebody handling the recruiting aspect of bringing this person in, and here's the story, not like a fictitious story, but here's how we pitch things. This is our employee value proposition. This is our brand. This is what we're all about. And then that filters into the hiring manager and eventually the supervisor that's working with this person on the day-to-day, and they're not always on the same page. And it's a struggle, especially for you third-party recruiters, because you're on the outside even more so. Your customer is usually that HR director or HR manager, talent acquisition team, etc. And so you're faced with this conundrum of, you told me it was X, but there's something between X and Z, and I'm not clear on what it is. And that employee coming in the door sees that. In the first 2 weeks, we'll segue here into kind of horrible onboarding experiences, right? When they run into these scenarios, they're like, but this is not what you said was going to happen, right? This
Yeah.
is completely 180 degrees the other direction. And then when you try to make suggestions on, hey, just sharing some feedback, you get lambasted for it. People are kind of running you roughshod, like, what are you doing? This is our process. How dare you try to change this stuff? You're doing my job and blah, 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 blah. No, if you're going to bring somebody into your culture, they're adding to your culture. They're not fitting your culture. Yes, there's getting along with people and having similar mindset about this is how we get work done, but they have to be bringing something to the sauce. Like you talk about the hot sauce, I use a sauce, spaghetti sauce, right? You're going to add some more salt, some sugar, some oregano, some parsley, some Parmesan, etc. You got to add different flavors. If you're not bringing some extra flavor, maybe it's a little more sweet, maybe it's a little bit spicy, you have to add to it and expect that they're going to bring, maybe not as much as me, like I'm extra, and that might be too much for some people, but you have to think of it that way. And if you're not,
I love that analogy.
Then you're trying to create an echo chamber, and that's dangerous.
And I think a lot of the people that are creating an echo chamber don't do it with malice. My dad always had this quote. It was, the road to hell is paved with good intention. And the point being, I'm not going to get too deep down the rabbit hole of that exact statement, but the point really being, a lot of the people that create those echo chambers don't realize they're doing it, don't intend to do it,
right?
And end up there anyways. So how can, and I've talked about that recruiting piece a ton. Recruiting is one of my favorite topics, as you probably know, but that disconnect between hiring manager and recruiting process. Hiring managers have to be a part of that process for that culture to get off on the right foot. When the hiring manager just comes in, does their 1 hour interview, gives their feedback, and goes back to managing and the 12,000 other things managers are doing, there's a huge impact. And there's an opportunity for that echo chamber there because there's no true understanding and connection on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's the piece. I think that's having the manager in the discussions from the start, right? They don't need to be the one negotiating, every little nook and cranny, but they need to be in that meeting of, all right, what do you want? Let's go over this job description, right? And don't make the job description 17,000 bullets because that's ridiculous and nobody wants to read it and they're not going to apply, not the ones you want anyway, right? Make it realistic. Here's what you're going to do and make sure that hiring manager says, yes, that's accurate. All right, what happens when they're not doing that stuff? And so you have to create whoever is on the front of the recruiting cycle, and for the organization, it's kind of preemptively thinking about when things go off the rails or when there's stressors influencing the business, these projects didn't come in on time. What are some of the alternative scenarios that are going to come in? And really start thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, kind of like playing chess. Where are you going to move? What's going to happen? What's plan B? What's plan C? Just so you can start to have a roadmap of what that full circle of possibility is for that role. And I'm not saying it's going to go way off the rails, but you just want to be able to paint a story so that way that candidate, they're thinking 2, 3, 4 stories deep to understand, all right, in my last company, this sort of madness happened, and that's why everybody got frustrated and they yelled and screamed at each other and blah, 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 or whatever the scenario is. But they're thinking about those things. I don't want to walk into this rat's nest again. And so if you say, hey, this happens about once every 3 months where we have this inventory project and all hands on deck and we have some Saturday overtime. All right, now I know it's once every 3 months. All right, I'm good with that. It doesn't happen every week. Those type of scenarios. I think it's just clarity and being upfront and transparent, and you don't have to show them the P&L statement or anything, but being a bit more open about, this is the realistic picture, and, I just got finished with this project and this is why it took me so long and so on and so forth. Like, you have to share those elements because that's building trust and honesty from the ground up, from the outside in. And managers who are open to sharing that are going to have a much higher success rate in that realm than ones who are like, no, we don't like to share that stuff and we're not going to tell you. I'm like, great.
Your companies build better culture, right? Like, these are the building blocks for building better culture. You can't just decide what your culture is. You can't just say what your culture is. Your culture is how people react to what you do, and how you react to what you do. And I think this is a key building block. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely on the right track. I think you see some people do it really well with some video vignettes about, hey, here's what I really like, and this is what my manager did for me, and when I was going through a rough time, and those kind of, sappy stories. But also, hey, it's not that every project is a super success and goes on track. When it does, we all jump into the nest. The boss even jumps in and picks up some of the slack. or hey, it's really on us as team members to get us to the promised land. The manager kind of sets the tone and so forth. It's giving a story that people can bite into. And these days, I find that these younger generations appreciate the storytelling aspect. They want to know, how does this fit in? How am I going to connect to this? How is it going to be meaningful? They're going to see how you do it, and when the engagement factor kicks in, how do I connect to how you're doing things? Is yes. That cool? Some people you can roll with the punches. Oh, great, that's a good person to have.
Yeah, and some,
but yeah, some just no. They're gonna go find greener pastures, and it'll be greener, and they'll be happier, and you'll be at a loss.
And it just comes back to that, recruiting. You can put all this stuff out there to get the right talent in, but if it's not the product you say it is, if it's not what it is, you're gonna lose the folks. So I think we've talked about a lot of the good getting them in here in the last couple of minutes. You had mentioned onboarding. So let's just assume your hiring manager is connected with recruiting and the job posting's true to what you say you are. Someone shows up on day one. Onboarding, the first 90 days, is so massive, and so many places get it wrong. So many places, again, think they don't get it wrong and get it wrong. Some don't even care about it and think about it. All right, you're hired, shut up, here's your workload, get to it, we're paying you now. But other than those realizations, what is good onboarding? How does onboarding genuinely connect to culture, and how do you connect culture to onboarding to keep this train of positive culture building moving forward?
I've always liked having sort of a syllabus for new hires. And what I mean by that is, all right, here's a general outline of what you as the employee are going to experience. I want to weave you into different aspects, the team that you're directly working with, but also the tangent teams that you're going to come into, and giving them sort of not necessarily the org chart, but giving them an expectation of, here's the first couple of weeks, you're going to be lost. Right. And it's just because we're dumping all sorts of information on you. And that's why some people do more shadowing, and they do kind of 2-week orientation class and that sort of stuff. But I think if you give them the roadmap of, here's what you're going to cover and what you're going to learn, both today, tomorrow, but next week, next month, that 30, 60, 90-day plan, but also tell them, here's our expectations, right? I don't expect you to have 10 client meetings a day in the first 30 days. Right? That's unrealistic if you're coming at it great.
I have heard that before.
Here's how I want to ramp you up. But if you give them a ramp schedule, and especially you talk about sales folks like us, right? It's understanding, all right, I know my number. I'll go hit it. I'm going to go achieve it and exceed it, and this is how I'm going to do it. Or I've got some of my own extra work to put in or elbow grease to put in to get myself there. And it also gives me the opportunity to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do I get there? I'm missing this point. This seems to be awry. And having that sort of syllabus as a living, breathing, feedback gathering engine helps you with that onboarding experience, so that way you as the employer can see what the employee is experiencing, surveying them along the way, not lengthy, but hey, are we hitting the marks? Is what we've put in front of you what actually happens, and is that okay? How could we have done this better? I see plenty of organizations do kind of check-ins, both from a mental state. Are you in good? Are we doing a good job? Are you feeling comfortable? Are we weaving you in? Are you missing any key information? But as you get into more experienced roles, say you're going to hire a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, am I giving you the right tools and platform? Are you access to the right leaders in the organization? So when your project's not going in the right direction, where do I go? If your software isn't operating right, have I given you the instructions on how? Don't just tell me to call the help desk. That doesn't tell me anything. It kind of give me some more context. It usually takes them a day to get back, or this is what's going on, or I'm going to make this phone call and get this thing moving. And you, as the hiring entity or the hiring manager, you have to set aside extra time in your day. I know you have another set of people working for you, but you have to build in an extra couple of hours every single day, just anticipating those moments when this person has questions. Even if they don't have questions that day, right? You have some ability to kind of move some stuff around.
There's nothing worse than that. Like, my manager's always busy. I don't want to go in and bother them as an employee.
Right.
And that's what a lot of places.
The employee wants to seem competent, right? The employee wants you to feel confident that you made the right hire in that first month, 2 months, 3 months. They're worried about their job security, right? And so if you give them that opportunity to ask questions on a regular cadence, and you can say, hey, the first week I'm going to check in with you once a day. Second week it's once every other day, and we're going to start spanning this out and get into a regular cadence, and you can weave in a bunch of these aspects. but get their feedback and know up front, hey, I want you to be able to tell me if this is too frequent or not frequent enough as we move along. Certainly you can't keep the kid gloves on forever, and you have to be clear about that. Look, I want to help you out, but some of this you're going to have to learn and take some extra effort. You may take extra time to do this, but it's that whole learning mindset of how do you learn? Do you learn by doing? Do you learn by listening? Do you learn by reading a book and then, following the steps? You have to know some of those things, and you can get some of that in an interview piece as you bring somebody into the organization. But once they're there, you really have to make that concrete and kind of figure out, how do I morph this onboarding plan with these different type of learning styles?
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really good pieces there, and you did it really smoothly. Onboarding does not have to be this monster heavy lifting, but have a roadmap, have a syllabus, communicate that, and then be open for feedback, encourage it, and also allow it when it just comes at you. Prepare for that. Think ahead, create that time for that new employee, but also be there when that time isn't necessarily scheduled and the employee is coming to you.
Yeah, I think back in my staffing days, when I did a lot of temp staffing, when we bring in somebody new, I would tell them, here's all the things in our process. The challenge is that somebody may walk in the door at any point in this process, but I want you to know all the steps so that I can point to say, hey, watch, we're at step 17, and we're going to carry them through step 25 today. Right. And so this gives them that path. They start to connect the dots, and it makes more sense to them when they do it themselves. Yeah, from start to finish, I get it. But if I have to pick up the pace, run a background check on somebody who's already knee deep in onboarding, all right, now I know where I'm at, and so on and so forth. But again, that's laying out stuff ahead of time and thinking about what does this process really need to look like. But it's a time investment. Somebody's got to operationalize some of this stuff just to say, all right, this is important for the next group of hires and our next group of leaders. And yeah, you can probably digitize it at some point and make it even more efficient. But know that you have to set these pieces aside. You have to set time aside for all these little projects, in addition to leading a team, in addition to your own workload. So budget for it. Know that sometimes you got to say, hey, owner of my business, you wanted me to do this extra stuff. There isn't enough time in the day, right? You need to take something off my plate or give me some help with some of these things in order for this stuff to happen in the time frame that you want.
This has been fantastic. I hate to say it. Normally it's like, all right, we'll take a little break. I have to stop us, take a break. This is such a good flow. But when I get back, I want to talk about, sounds like a lot of this is manager heavy, right? Manager driven. I want to talk a lot about how you can empower those managers. They tend to have some of the biggest impact on culture. They tend to have a lot asked of them from the employees in the organization. They also, unfortunately, tend to not have enough training and resources in a lot of cases. And I want to talk about that whole landscape when we get back.
100%.
Quick break. We'll be right back. All right, Tom, are you ready for the HR hot sauce?
I'm ready.
Broad question. What most engages you?
The energy of people.
Fantastic. What's your favorite piece of technology you use at work?
Lately, my Google Pixel Watch.
Ooh.
I like all the different pieces that you can use with it. It's not an Apple Watch. I'm not an Apple guy, but I like to use it. Workout, walking, dog, hitting music selections, etc.
Fantastic. What's your favorite interview question to ask or be asked?
Well, to be asked, I like questions about how you would have done things differently or improved a scenario sort of questions. It forces folks to be reflective about what they've done wrong, right? Where they could have done better.
Absolutely. I'm 100% aligned with you. Those are my favorite to ask, and some of the hardest ones to be asked if you're not prepared. Favorite workday lunch?
I'm a sandwich guy. A nice juicy roast beef sandwich on marble rye or rye with some Russian dressing.
Oh man, that sounds great. What's your most unique or useless skill?
I'm a master prankster. I will play pranks on just about anybody if I think it's warranted, and sometimes when it's not. But my only rule is do no harm. So you can't break anything or destroy somebody's yard or lawn or house or anything.
Strong rule and a great skill. What makes your day at work?
When you've helped somebody with advice or guidance and you start to see them come to their own aha moments, thinking, "Oh, I can do this," and they're doing it on their own. Not because you're lifting something for them, but they start to solve things on their own because of some guidance and some advice you gave.
Final question: mild, medium, hot, or nuclear?
Hot. Nuclear is a bit much. And granted, I eat kimchi. I like hot kimchi, but hot's good.
All right, we're done with the HR hot sauce. Let's get back to the show. All right, we're back. Tom, how's the hot sauce?
Delicious. Spicy, savory at the same time. My mouth's a little on fire.
But not nuclear.
No.
But not.
I've done that, but that's trouble.
Yeah, it is trouble. Someone was talking to me about, I forget where it was, but like at work, somebody had the super hot sauce and like pranked it. And I was like, that's a dangerous game to play at work.
That might be my one zone where you can sort of bridge on the prank game, meaning, all right, I'm not really harming you. You won't like it, but this could be really funny for the rest of us. Put that in the ketchup or something like that in the fridge and, hope for the best and see what happens. It's kind of like when you see those donut memes around April Fool's Day where it's like, not instead of a jelly donut, it's got something nasty. It's got whipped cream, not whipped cream inside the donut filling, but it's something gross. Yeah. I'm like that's something I would totally do. And now probably my friends are thinking, oh, we're gonna get you, Tom, because I love donuts. I just try not to eat them.
I love donuts. I try not to eat them. And there's this new place, We Need Donut, near me, and it is out of control good. They have all kinds of wild donuts and cronuts. They got stuff with like little strips of like fruit roll-up looking stuff, like over clouds of whipped cream, and like, I mean, all the kids go nuts, but man, their donuts are good.
Heaven.
And
that's heaven.
The kids love it, and it makes me eat more donuts than I want to.
Oh. It's painful. I went to a meeting this morning and they had donuts, and I persevered and got out without opened the box. Somebody opened the box even. I'm like,
my favorite thing this donut place does do though is they throw 3 or 4 of the little donut holes into every box, no matter how many you buy. So the times where I do have restraint, I can just grab one of those holes and be like, that tasted great, and be done. They give me a total way out while the kids eat all the other donuts. I'm like, thank you.
That's brilliant.
So much for figuring this thing out.
Oh,
great marketing.
I think in another life I was a donut shop owner. That's probably what it was.
Maybe it's our future life. Let's say Tom's Donuts. I can be the hole.
Yep. No, I got a picture of me that I had up online recently of me at Paula's Donuts out in Buffalo, where I had a picture. I'm like, I'll throw it to a social post. This will be funny. And it's my head in the donut hole. So, but fabulous donut shop if you're out in Western New York anytime soon.
We'll put a link to that. I always like advertising and putting links to everything we talk about, so anyone listening can archive any of these pieces. Speaking of, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods next week, by the way.
Wow.
Flying out to Hudson, New York. Flying to LaGuardia, yuck. And driving to Hudson, New York, my old stomping grounds, right. Hudson Valley. So I'll be thinking of you. I don't know if I'm going to get the 45 minutes wherever you are, but we'll be in the same.
Yeah, it's pretty close. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a beautiful time of year. This where we're at right now is super hot, but that'll calm down another week, and then we'll have another hot spell, and then it'll calm down and probably snow in August, and then we'll have another hot summer going from September, October, and snow and sunshine and back and forth. It's like third winter and fourth, fifth summer that just kind of spells it out. So that's the crazy upstate New York weather.
I've been dreading. It's going to be an awesome wedding that I'm best man in. Pretty excited about that. But looking at the weather and standing in a suit out in the sun, I think that it's like 4:30 or something. I was like, oh man, I'm going to be a ball of sweat during this thing.
You need one of those neck fan things that they sell, right? It wraps around your neck. It's got the 2 fans with the cooler.
I saw a kid with one of those at the tournament this weekend. I was like, that kid's dialed in. This isn't his first rodeo.
Yeah. I keep thinking about it when we go to like Disney World and stuff. You see all the families that have those. I'm like, that's brilliant. I need one of those. But then you got to lug it around. But for a wedding, you just take it off, put it on the table.
You know, I might invest. I'm going to go Amazon as soon as we're off of this.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive back in. We were having an awesome conversation. See this. I feel like you and I could do this for probably 100 hours straight if we were challenged properly,
probably.
And just marathon this baby. But we were talking.
That's my unspoken skill is talking too long.
Yeah, you didn't give that no 2 skills, no sneaking an extra hot sauce answer in here. But no, we're talking about, culture building, but kind of indirectly, right? In the best way, because that's what culture is, unfortunately, fortunately. Building, and we'd kind of gotten to the point of, a lot of this does have to be manager driven. And everyone out there probably knows their managers are important. But how do you get the managers to the point to where they know it's the right thing to do to leave room on their calendars for that training? How do they know how to balance being there and let someone be their whole person, and you being a whole person, and the organization being the whole person, but then also being the person that's given a performance review, being the person that might be leading the hiring and firing, being the person that has to tell you, even just on a one-on-one, hey man, last week, that thing you turned in, man, that was way below what your expectation. Like, let's talk about management development in that kind of umbrella of culture.
Yeah, I think first off, whether or not you have an organization that supports learning and development, if you know that it's important in your heart of hearts, which hopefully you do, not everybody does. Some people think they know everything. I don't know that I can help them. But if you know in your heart of hearts we need something and you don't have that, it's speaking up to the rest of the leadership, hey, this is an important piece. Put it in your long-term development. Put it in your own personal development plan, because you should have one of those. If you're doing employee reviews yourself, you probably have one that you're doing, with your boss.
Good point.
But you have to have a supportive environment for learning and development across the board. You teach new employees. You were a new employee at one point, whether it was that organization or you came in from the outside. At some point, you were that new employee, learning how to do tasks, learning how to get along with folks, how to use the copier, the scanner. I'll date myself and say fax machine. But, those kind of elements, when you have to press 9 to get out and, use this, path to get to the conference room on the 7th floor, etc. Put yourself back in the shoes of that new to the workforce you, and what would have made it better? What made it worse? Don't be that person, right? We've all had that boss where, hey, I'm going to learn to not be like you, and I'm going to do everything 180 degrees, or somewhere off there, do it differently and do it better. Treat people nicer, treat people more fairly. Think back to those moments. That's going to really set the tone of, all right, I realize I have 60 hours of work to do every week, but I've got to fit 10 of this in for my people.
Yeah.
So they need to come first. If you're a manager of people, they always come first. They're always the priority. I understand people say customers are number one priority, but if you're not taking care of your people, they're not taking care of your customers.
Yeah, I came out of hospitality, and the best hotels I worked at, it was the number one guest is the employee. The number one customer is the employee. They can quit on the spot. They don't have to show up.
Right.
They show up every day.
And if you treat them wrong, that employee in a hospitality environment, that's going to show up to the customer. Because they're really like, I just got yelled at and reamed for something that wasn't my fault, and it was Joe's fault, right? But I got in trouble for it. It's kind of like getting sent to the principal's office. How are you going to look and feel and put that smile back on your face when you're like, F you, man?
And my radar is
I
up,
don't need
right?
this
And
job.
I'm sure yours is, but I can think of 3 conversations in the last 2 weeks of employees at businesses having those conversations, and me as a customer in earshot listening to them being like, oh man, like my entire work life, this entire podcast, just blowing through my head as I hear these conversations happening. Like, this isn't like a outlier thing that happens. This is something that happens all the time. So empathy.
I liken it to being, so I train at the gym that I go to, and I always have to keep reminding myself, and I'm still relatively new at this part of it, coach on one thing. Find one thing that you can help them fix and get that piece right. Like when I started coaching, it was, fix this. Oh, hey, do this. Change your posture. Get your butt down. Put your chest up. Put your eyes up. Right? And they just, you lose focus. And I have to remind myself back to when I started. It was one of those, just give me 1 or 2 things. I would want 17 things. That's just the way my brain works. I need a squirrel moment. But, I think back, it's a lot to remember. And so if you think in your employee groups, give them one thing, give them time to adopt it, get them time to get it right and get it better. And then when they're ready for the next piece, you layer that in. If you're at a point where you're saying, hey, you got to fix this one thing or you're fired, then you as the manager have done a disservice to this employee.
Yes.
Right? You haven't stopped, and you've either not paid close enough attention, or you don't have a long enough leash to teach them how to do the job well. I understand some people fit and some people don't. But you have to if you're going to hire them, take the time to teach them how to do the things, train them on the things, to do better, to do efficiently, and give them that runway to succeed. Give them a path to success. Help them be more successful. Don't just say, hey, go put 12 things in a box an hour, otherwise you're out of here. That's not realistic. That doesn't make them feel good. That makes them feel like a number and not a person.
This exact conversation you have of a manager with their employee is the exact same advice I would give to the manager of that manager as a company as a whole to look at these things. It's, yes, the managers have to execute this, and frontline managers, super important, but organizations have to stop and be able to give that same advice to their managers. So, how do you do that? You rely on these managers. They're running your business. They're day to day. Dealing with the employee stuff. They're dealing with customers. Dealing with everything. But how do you train the managers? That's one of the things I always hear. There's no management training. Managers are just promoted because they were high performers. How can organizations that say, I just don't have time to train my managers. I hired them because they have the skills. They got to do it. I don't have time for this. What do you say to those companies, and what advice can you give to those companies?
So if you were to buy a $60,000 car, knowing that you need to spend $2,000 a year on maintenance, but you only have the $60,000, should you still buy that $60,000 car?
No. No, you should not.
Right. You got to budget for it. It's kind of like hiring somebody at a certain salary level, right? Knowing that, hey, eventually they're going to want more. You got to build in those raises. I'm going to hire for a certain skill set. They're going to want more. I need to get them there. The better I make this person, the more information I can relate to them, either myself or hiring somebody to do that stuff with me or for me. That means bringing in a consultant, bringing in a company to help with some of these pieces, sending people out for training. There's lots of options to get additional information and weave this in. Some are more budget friendly, some are more costly. It kind of depends on budgets. But if you're telling your people you need to teach your people, train your people to do better, and your boss isn't giving you that leeway to teach you how to be a better manager, then you need to be vocal about it. And there's nice ways and appropriate ways to do that. I'm not saying you have to put down the hammer, but look, if you want me to get better, invest in me. You think about physicians, attorneys, accountants. They all get these CEU budgets to go do things, right? CME, CEU, whatever it is. There's a budget for it. If you're going into HR role and they're requiring you to have a PHR, well, yeah, you should have a budget for sending me to programs, right? It shouldn't just be on me. You should have a budget for a few $1,000s so I can go to a conference and get 20 credits and this and that and the other. And, I'm a big SHRM supporter. It doesn't mean that I need to give you a $10,000 budget to go to SHRM National of Year. That'd be great.
There's a lot of cost-effective. There's more than ever. You've got LinkedIn Learning, Udemy. There's learning platforms everywhere. Josh Burson Academy. I did a whole bunch of that when I officially got into.
That's awesome.
It's not that hard or expensive for organizations. Like you said, you don't have to give $10,000.
It's the time. That's the biggest component. You've got to give me an hour a week to do and hold me accountable to it. Make sure I'm reporting back if you don't think that I'm going to do it, or if I'm just being so caught up in doing rather than self-development, then you got to call me out on it. But the same token, if I'm a better leader and I get better skills and I have a coach or I'm going to classes, my people are going to see that you're investing me as a leader, which gives me a growth track as an employee. It gives me something to hope for. The learning doesn't just stop once I know how to put 20 widgets in a box, right? I have room to add to my skills and my knowledge base, which is what most people want these days. They want to impact the business. And how do they do that? They have to learn it. And you've got to give that learning opportunity to them.
That was one of the bigger pivots I saw just in the space over my time, really being in the space over the last 7-8 years. And I'd always been around it, but really focused in on it, was engagement. And I'm an engagement guy. It's in the name of the podcast. I love engagement. Yeah. But the realization of people who can be engaged but still not be growing. People can be engaged and still be you can still lose them. And that skills is the one conversation over the last 2-3 years that's really come up, is that building skills, identifying skills, knowing skills within your own organization, so people can be on different paths, knowing who wants to learn more skills and who wants to just kind of stay where they're at. Like you mentioned skills there, I think, and I love that focus that skills really is important. Like building that, whatever it is you're doing, how do you keep doing it better? Even if it's micro learning, even if it's macro learning, like going and encouraging a different degree or a different course. But I really do think that skills is the glue for a lot of engagement, for a lot of culture. And companies that identify that and build that in, build the time into the job to constantly do that are the ones that are winning this war of talent right now.
Yeah, I can think back decades ago, back in my publishing days, I had a colleague who ran a technology group, and he was constantly feeding them with new information, new training that no one else was. And so it was his retention piece. It was a fringe benefit to his style. He knew it was important.
Sure.
But no one else was offering those things. And he was sort of the leader of the pack in that regard. And so his team stayed with him. Even when he left the organization, some of them followed him because they knew his style and his approach to things. Like, look, you're going to add skills. You're going to be more marketable, both for us, and you're going to be more productive for us. Yeah, there's a chance you might take those skills and go somewhere else. But there's also a good chance that you're going to take those skills and stay.
And that's why this culture conversation, like I said, we talked for 100. Employee experience has 26 different identified things if you go to the Sherman HR Tech and listen to. But like culture is an aggregation of a million different little things. But there's the big buckets that you can control. And I think that leadership development skills, onboarding, recruiting with heart, letting people be themselves, you as an organization being that and coming together, it's hard work. And that's why you do what you do. So
yeah,
we're kind of getting down to the end here. I want you to talk about you for a second. So I just kind of teed it up with tying all this together with culture, but that's why you do what you do, right? Like it is huge, and I feel like it's something that get pushed off by a lot of organizations or just talked about, not actioned. But you're 100% focused on building better culture. Tell me what and how you're going about that, so you can share with our audience really what you're doing in terms of not just being on a podcast.
No, don't get me wrong. I love being on your podcast, Tom. This is great fun. I'm having a time of my life. You know, when I think about it, we've all been in the scenarios where we've had bosses we've loved, bosses that we've hated, good scenarios, bad scenarios. If you're lucky enough to have only had great bosses, I'm happy for you. Odds are you're going to have one that's not so friendly to what your needs are, and you'll realize what you had. But at the end of the day, it helps you reflect on the fact that you should be able to be happy at work and be productive at work doing the things that you love. And it doesn't mean that you get all your fixes out of that 9 to 5, right? There's family, there's community, there's volunteerism, and so forth. But for the bulk of things, everybody, for me, deserves a chance to be in a warm, welcoming environment. That's connecting to your culture. And so when I started this whole thing, part of it was trying to let people know there's a path here. You don't have to just keep on doing things because that's how you've been doing them. You have an opportunity to teach folks how to do things better. I had an old friend of mine run this management training program way back in my publishing days, and it was sort of the model. I'm like, I love this, you know. And so that gave me that passion and purpose to jump in at this stuff and provide a forum where managers who they want to do better, they just don't know how. Companies have managers who want to do better, but they don't know how to give that to them. So they ultimately can have a better culture, better retention, a better, happier workforce. And so the big path to that was connecting who controls that. HR has a voice, certainly.
Right.
The owners have a voice, but your frontline employees are affected primarily by their frontline managers and those mid-level managers. Those are the people they see when they get there in the morning or when they get online. That's who's running their meetings. Those who they're looking up to and listening to. Well, if you can fix some of the gaps of knowledge or gaps of experience with them, instead of having 30% engagement, which is the national average, by the way, 30% of your workforce is engaged. 70% is not across the U.S. Right. How dangerous is that?
Yeah.
So you take those stats into consideration and think, all right, if I can get half of my workforce engaged and really be intentional, not just throw muffins in the break room, but if I can get intentional about engaging with people, then I know people are happier, they're producing more. There's lots of benefits. I can go through all that stuff, but I will go through and help people figure out, here's my culture. What is it? How do I define it? How do I measure it? I will go with it and help them build an engagement strategy. This is the things that you need to do in order to better engage and find out what's the pulse of your organization. Different people connect to it differently, as we said. And largely, most of what I do is talking with managers, helping them one-on-one or in group settings or in workshops or keynote addresses, and sort of steering them in the direction of, I want more. We should all be in this lifelong learner mode that came from my publishing days.
Yeah.
I grew up with, my parents were educators, and it was always absorbing new information left and right. But if you're not thirsting for more knowledge, then maybe you're in the wrong environment. Maybe you need a place that inspires you to want more knowledge on how to do things, how to do them better. You don't necessarily need to be the manager of the world or the director of sales or VP of this and that and the other, but you can be the best at your craft and get better at it. And so that's kind of the environment that I'm trying to help small, medium-sized, or other businesses and leaders get to. And it's not so much that you need to reach a 10. It's if you're a 5, let's get you to a 6. And then tomorrow we'll worry about getting you to a 7 or a 6.5, whatever that number is. Just get a little better.
I love it. I can't disagree with any of that. This isn't videoed. I was nodding, I think, for the last 5 minutes. So that's fantastic. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us, share your wisdom. From the first second we spoke, I and connected, I was like, wow, this guy is just, he's got it. He's figured it out. Like he's done it. How can he help other organizations do it? So I really love what you're doing. We're going to give all of your information in our post-show notes, but Tom, where can people find you?
I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest place to find me. I put a lot of good content on. I say good. I put a lot of content on there.
I'll call it good.
And so I'll call it good. There's newsletters, there's blog posts. I share a lot of articles that I come across, but LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me. Otherwise, find me at buildbetterculture.com.
All right, we'll look for you there. We'll share all that. Everybody, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. Definitely do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. You can find me, you can find Tom, LinkedIn, wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of getting better, that's our theme song. So break signals, take it away. We'll see you next time.